point that you see this working no matter what administration takes over from here. Walk us through that, because you think about reshoring, that seems more of a right-leaning impulse.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show today. I think right now in the U.S. government, in the upcoming election, there's not many things that both sides of the political spectrum agree on. But one thing they do consistently agree on, and is featuring increasingly in their election manifestos, is bringing jobs, investment, manufacturing back to the U.S. That was initially, spurred from what we saw out of COVID, when there was obviously a lot of supply chain dislocation, concerns about inflation. But what was initially a tactical move is really now becoming a much more strategic move, aided by a number of government incentives, acts that have really accelerated this trend. So we're seeing a huge, some would call it a renaissance of reindustrialization, manufacturing, sweeping the middle of the U.S., but also parts of the coast.
There are splashy announcements that companies make about reshoring their supply chain to the U.S., and then there's the actual follow-up, whether they do it or not. Are you adding the names only after doing the due diligence to make sure that they've taken action? Because in some ways, that would make you like a reporter, where you have to follow up to make sure that the company has done what it said it would do.
Correct. So we are an active fund, which means that we do bottom-up fundamental research. The manager of the fund has a 25-year track record, top performing in investing in industrials. So you understand the sector, you understand the companies, and you also understand that, as you mentioned, companies sometimes say things which you don't follow up on. So we're very conscientious, and we also engage with companies. We speak with companies, we understand, we really follow companies quite close from an earnings perspective. And to your point, there have been over 40 mega projects announced with respect to reshoring since 2022, combined estimated value about $1 trillion. But if you think about how much is actually being spent of that trillion, we estimate it's only about 150 billion so far. So we're very thoughtful and very serious about actually going after companies that are dedicated to reshoring, are putting not just a word of mouth there, but actually putting dollars behind it. And in some cases have actually realized or opening projects. These are big projects. These are projects that take a number of years, often take big amounts of money to unlock. And therefore, we don't think these are short-term solutions. These are long-term trends. You don't build a $20 billion plant to open it tomorrow and close it next year. This is a 10, 20-year commitment. Some would call this the process of deglobalization. Globalization was a process that went over 20, 30 years. The process of deglobalization or relocation will take, again, another 10, 20 years. We believe we're still in the very early innings of that overall process.
And, one of the things, the sub-angles in this theme that is interesting to me is the environmental theme. Could this be converted into somehow an ESG play? Because if you're putting less stress on moving stuff around the world, wouldn't that be helpful for the environment?
Yeah, so we are not, to be clear, we're not an ESG fund, but I do believe, I think you're right, Eric, that this iteration of reindustrialization will be a lot cleaner than previous reindustrializations we saw in some 50, 100 years ago. And we think that basically will allow for cleaner manufacturing, leaner manufacturing, and ultimately more scalable manufacturing, which will be better for all parties associated, whether it's on the environmental side, on the social side, on the government side. So we are not an ESG fund, but we do believe that we're encouraged by how we're seeing this process of manufacturing and reindustrialization take place. We believe it's characteristically different to anything we've seen before in the last 20, 30, 50 years.